Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Hi, and welcome to Common Ground. I'm your host, Ashley Hall. On this week's episode of Common Ground, we visit photographer Joe Brandmeier, who relates his experience up north through photography and words. Also, Kelsey of Bemidji shows us the intricate detail he personalizes into each piece of jewelry he creates.
Good afternoon. I'm Kelsey. I'm a jeweler in Bemidji, and I have been making jewelry for 37 years. It's a passion. I always wanted to be an artist, so I went to BSU and started in the art department. A fellow by the name of Keith Malmquist was teaching the jewelry class, and when I'd show people what I was making, they'd want to buy it. Until here I am, almost 40 years later, doing it full time and still enjoying it. It's lots of fun. Well, one of the things that I'm going to do today is show you a couple processes. The first being an elementary way to work wax. Then we're going to play a little bit with some engraving because I'm a kind of a flower nut. When you start this, obviously you need a size for the finger, but we're not going to worry about that so much as cutting off this plastic wax ring blank. You start here, and your file is your friend. There's lots of handwork, so you round it out. Now, if I were to just totally work the file, I would have probably a 45-minute filing time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over to the water sander, which does two things. It keeps the wax from melting, and I can shape it fast. So first of all, I establish what I want on the top. The water helps keep it cool enough so when it melts on my finger, it doesn't leave a blister. I also use this sander for rough finishing the metals, because you can, again, shape it without burning your hands. You almost have to be a little bit of a masochist to be a jeweler because there are lots of heat things to be aware of, a lot of sharp instruments that you're moving metal with. What I want when I'm shaping it like this is an evenness and a shape form so that I can then go refine it with the wax file. Normally, what I would do is I would draw a ring for someone. They would come in with an idea if they like fish or if they like birds or if they like morel mushrooms, all of the above. And what you do is then you have to have that in your mind and then rough it in, and then you just keep refining it with the hands file. One of the travails of getting older is magnification to help see better. The better you can see, the less mistakes you make. When I'm making things, it gives me an opportunity to think. I also listen to music most of the time. The concentration has to be pretty exact because if someone comes in and takes your concentration away, a 1 millimeter slip can break a stone or put something in your finger. So what I'm doing now is I'm reducing this wax just with a little bit of an oval shape on the top, smoothing it out, because the more flowing a design, the nicer it is as an end result. So I want to drop this corner down a little bit so that I can continue that curve. The manner in which you hold things can either make or break you. And I'm sure it's that way with many things, but especially in jewelry because your tolerances are so small. And thinking ahead to the person wearing it, I always try to round and smooth the edges of a piece. So it's starting to come. We need this to go down a little bit. The smaller the ring size, the trickier it is to get the design to work and be balanced. And so what you want is a balanced piece that flows. And that's kind of difficult sometimes in explaining to people the mechanics of their idea is a wonderful idea. However, the reality is if it's not comfortable and they wear it and they think of me too often, they won't be too happy. So a ring should fit, be comfortable, and really not noticeable to the wearer. Again, these square corners on the bottom really help. And one of the things I enjoy about working with wax is I'm sure as a child, everyone tried at least to carve soap. And one of the disappointing things about carving soap, of course, is when it breaks, you can't fix it. Now this is a little heat device so that if this breaks, I can then fix it. The flowers are a big part of my jewelry. I have many designs that I carve, and I would carve one here, except that it does take a lot longer. This maybe will give, someone that's interested in how the process goes, this will at least give them a hint of what goes into it. It's just a touch thinner on this side than this. So what I do is I'm down to the fine part of the file, not the heavy cutting part. So I keep this surface, and we got a little extra weight down here because we want the symmetry to be there as we work and the taper to work on both sides. So anytime you pick up the finished piece of work, you're going to have like a mini sculpture, basically. The first lost wax casting, that's what this is called, is lost wax, was in about 6000 BC. So it's been around a while. Although the materials and the tools have made it much, much easier. So this is a tool that is really like a miniature blowtorch. That's a wonderful thing. Here we go. I don't know how close you can get in, but you can see what a wonderful help this is. As long as you keep your fingers out of the way. The better the finish on the wax, the easier it is to clean up the finished product once it's in metal. So now that we have this piece, the next step would be to sprue it up on a base like this. This goes over it, locks in, and you mix up plaster, and the plaster is fine enough that you can actually sign the inside of the ring with a probe like this, and it will pick up your signature. That's how delicate it is. There's the wax, and the finished product. So what I'm going to do at this point, this is a nice clean casting. It has been filed and it has been buffed and shined up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a stone in one side and then engrave floral patterns up the other side. Normally what I would do or have done in the past is start a pilot like this and then go to a drill press and drill it. But since I bought this laser, I just blow a hole through it, which is a lot more fun too. The laser splashes metal together, and what I'm doing is putting it up high as far as power, and I'm narrowing the beam down so I can have a pilot hole through. And so that should be just about right there. Now, this is something called burr life. You can use beeswax also. This has a little more plastic to it, and it keeps the heat down as you're working, because if your tool gets hot, it will lose its temper and get dull. So it's not how fast you go, but it's steady. So then it was starting to get hot. And we're through. Now the natural inclination, of course, is to grab that right away, but that ring is quite warm at this point. So what we've done is we've created an opening so that we can clean a stone. This happens to be the stone that I've just picked out, this small little emerald. That's one thing I do incredibly enjoy about making jewelry, and that is all the stones that I get to work with. They're beautiful colors, different shapes, very nice. And of course, each shape has its own little challenge. Now, what I'm doing, this shape burr, of course, goes in like this. So what I'm doing is I'll put the girdle of the stone at the bottom of this so it fits in. And what I want is to have it deep enough so that the girdle is below the surface of the metal. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut V's on each side and then raise a bead of metal to hold the stone. Now let's check and make sure. This is beeswax, and I use it because I can shape it and it picks up stones. Now you always, one of the first things you learn when you're setting stones is that you always watch the stone when you move it, because if it hits, it takes a half hour to find it, if you're lucky. Now, before I put the stone in there, I have one more thing to do, and that's to azure the hole that I've drilled through there and make an angle like this, so that once the stone is set and I go to clean it, I can direct the steam from the steamer in there to clean it easily. This is a small mechanical jackhammer, and it makes life much easier. Because of the curve of the ring, I'm going to put a bead on the lower right and a bead on the upper right, and then one on the left-hand side. One learns fairly fast to keep your finger below the metal, because seeing how sharp that graver is, you might imagine how easy it slips into your finger. Like I say, jewelry is somewhat masochistic, but at the same time, the finished product is worth it. Because you get to interact in so many people's lives and make special things for them. So you want to double check and make sure that ring is secure, because I'm going to be pushing metal at this point. So I go right to the end of the little V. All right, now we've got it started well. Use another tool called a beading tool. Now the beading tool consists of this piece of tool steel that's cupped. That metal that I raise, I'm going to form a bead out of it so it looks nice and neat. So what I'm doing is bracing myself from every direction I can so that if that slips, it doesn't do something strange to my thumb or my hand or break the stone. So I push them down, and now I go around each one and finish them. At this point, the stone is not tight, so I have to push them farther. This is one of the most secure ways to set a stone. 3 points of metal hold, no glue, strictly metal. You can't trust glue to hold stones in. I'm going to trim that back. And that bead needs just a little bit more work. So we're starting to get there. Now I'm going to use the power graver to trim this up a little bit more too. What I'm doing is trimming on each side of the bead. To isolate them. I think we'll make a curve to go with the curve of the ring here. There's a little movement in that stone, so I'll need to do that beading tool again to make sure they're snug. Okay. Gonna make a leaf on this side of it, and I think we'll be all right. Just in the vise here. You want that. So that's the stone setting. And then what we're going to do is I promised a little floral up the side. So we're going to put it on a mandrel because it works better to make your leaf indentations. These are handmade. They'll leave a little flower impression if I hit it right. Jewelry marks a time and place or an event in people's lives. That's the reason that it's important, I think, to people. So, back to my other flex shaft, and I'm going to go over the engraving just to smooth it off so nobody cuts themselves. There we go. What I'm doing is I'll go from here to a two-step finishing process because the inside of the ring has already been finished. You'll notice that it does have that Euro shank to keep it balanced better and a nice, comfortable shape to it. So at this point, I'm going to go use this machine and turn a large dust collector on because rouge is aluminum oxide and it will cut your lungs. So the first step is bobbing compound. Because what you want at the end is a beautiful, solid surface. This is not an operation you can wear gloves on because you need the feeling of your hands so that you don't buff too hard and start to leave marks. There we go. Now, the next step is an ultrasonic, which is over here, with hot soapy water in it. Basket in case you were successful at setting the stones. This next step is 90 pounds of live steam. So there we have a nice ring. And I can put it, I'll have to put a fresh Band-Aid on it, looks like. That's good.
It's very pretty, very pretty.
You see where the flower shapes come in. And the older they get, the more they start to show up because of oxidation.
Okay.
And see, then you can build a little flower out of gold and put it in there.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I like the two-tone in that, but this is so pretty. It's just very delicate. The detail is just intricate.
My name is Joe Brandmeier. In my real life, I am a producer and director and have kind of been fortunate to travel around the world with all kind of cool artists and stuff. But on the side for the last several years, I've been slowly just taking pictures of my favorite places, which is anything that has to do with up north, northern Wisconsin, northern Michigan, you know, the whole area in the Midwest kind of stuff. And I think why I have such a passion for it is when I was a kid, we have a family, there's 6 kids in our family, 5 boys and 1 girl, and our vacation was always get in the car, head a couple hours in northern Wisconsin, which is kind of in the Eagle River, Wisconsin area. And we have this great log cabin, which my grandpa built, you know, in the early 1900s, and that was our vacation. So we went up there and we hung out for weeks sometimes in the northern woods of Wisconsin. And through that, as kids, we kind of grew to really find a passion for nature, for outdoors, for, you know, animals and wildlife and sunsets. And I think that's kind of where the passion started as a kid. And it just kind of grew into, you know, the real life brought me into photography, and photography brought me into, you know, meeting up with this Tristan Publishing, who kind of turned it into a book. One of the things about the book Up North is it's really important that it's not about my up north, it's about anybody's up north, and I think it's about moments. It's an escape from reality for not only myself, but for a lot of people. And I think the connection is we are all so crazy with our day-to-day lives, and I think nature kind of brings us back to reality. When we were putting the book together, I had about 100 shots that we narrowed down to about 80, and then we kind of laid them out in a format that felt like it made sense in the book. And then what was really important to me is that I handpicked all the quotes, and they're quotes that really, really mean a lot to me. So I think it's a combination of People like John Muir, Albert Einstein, and big thinkers like that, mixed in with, my family. My daughters have a couple of quotes in there. My brothers who I grew up, and my sister who I grew up going up north with. One of the quotes in the books is from John Muir, who is kind of considered the father of our national parks. And he says, when one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it connected to the rest of the world. And I think we truly are really connected in so many ways, whether it's nature or animals or just day-to-day life. So I think we're all connected and we all look for peace in some form or fashion, and I think nature and up north brings that to us. If you look at my book, I never really considered it a photography book in the sense of what you see in the picture is what I saw through the lens. I'm not a big Photoshop guy. I'm not a big motor drive guy, where we take 75 shots in half a second. I'm really about the moment. So I think what's different from this book is it truly is what I saw is what you see. It's not touched up. It's not, you might see a few flaws in there along the way, but basically I think that's what sets me off is they truly are pure pictures and they are pure moments tied into reflections of the quotes from people who really mean a lot to me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you next week right here on Common Ground. If you have a segment idea for Common Ground pertaining to North Central Minnesota, contact us at legacy@lptv.org or call us at 218-333-3022. To view this episode or any Common Ground segment, visit us at lptv.org/Common Ground. Individual segments or copies of Common Ground, please call 218-333-3020. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. If you enjoyed this segment of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org.